Well, hi, everybody. Welcome. I know everybody's probably had a long day, and we appreciate you taking the time to join with us this evening. I'm Jill Webb, head of the lower school, and I am joined for this particular session with Shelley Brown, who is our Director of Early Childhood and Assistant Lower School Head, and Danny Turkovich, who is our Director of Marketing and Communication, who will help us monitor the chat. And hopefully you were either with us live in Jeff's session last week, where he presented a complete overview of our return to school plan. If you haven't seen that, we urge you to watch the recorded version of that, which may answer a number of the questions that you have. Our goal tonight is to kind of pick up where we left off. And if you were with us last time, you'll know one of us spoke a little too slowly and we didn't get to all of our points. So we want to make sure we address those this evening. And if you have questions, we're going to ask you to post them in the chat. And Danny is towards the end of the session, we'll sort of be able to group those and look for themes, and then we'll respond to as many of them as time allows. And if for some reason we don't get to your question, Shelley and I are in the process of creating a frequently asked question sheet, and we'll try to answer your question in that, and we'll be getting that out to families in the next day or two. So again, we're glad you're here. And with that being said, I'm going to turn this over to Shelley Brown.
So tonight we're hopeful to share the schedules that you'll be able to see a sample Little Jag schedule and pre-K schedule, as well as a sample kindergarten schedule. And then we have some photos to help you imagine some of those time periods throughout the day. We'll also cover some pieces of technology that will be worth being familiar with, some things that you'll want to think about bringing for the first day of school, as well as some just questions around masks. I know we had a lot of questions in the chat last time, and about that social emotional health and safety aspect. I'm going to share my screen, which is always fun when we do that. And you will see a sample schedule on the screen. And this is a sample Little Jags and pre-K schedule. And I say sample because these times are not exact at this moment, but it'll give you an idea of the flow of the day. And we've mentioned the change in start time. So the doors to the classroom will open at 8:30, and faculty and teachers will be there to meet the children at the cars, and we will walk the students to their classrooms, and that will happen between 8:30 and 8:45. And once they arrive to the classroom, just as always, they'll be practicing those independent skills of hanging up their jackets, hanging up their backpacks, and getting started with their work for that day. One thing that'll be a little bit different is they will have their work spot, which I'll show you a photo of in a moment, just some examples of what that might look like. But they'll have a space that will be theirs, and the materials will be waiting for them that day, just like it would be in a traditional classroom. And during that time, they'll have options of what they're doing for their work. They'll have chances to do project work, and they'll also have an opportunity to eat snack at that time. We had some questions last time about snack. Snack will be provided by the family, so you will bring a snack for your own child. And if you've been with us before in Little Jags or pre-K, you'll know that usually we've done a community snack where you've provided snack for about a 2-week time span for the whole class. But every day you'll bring a healthy morning snack and a healthy afternoon snack for your child. And then after that, we will have our morning meeting time, and it'll be socially distanced, but a time for us to build that sense of community that's still very important. And you'll notice an asterisk next to the morning meeting. And that tells us that if you were to be learning from home, that's a time that your child would be included in that morning meeting. And so we have a new technology system. We have a 2-way video and 2-way audio. So your child would see the students in the morning meeting, and we would see your child at home. We would be able to hear your child, and they would be able to hear us. And then we would transition into a teacher choice time. And an example of what this might look like would be these photos here. So you can see a young child has her workspace, and then at her workspace are her materials. And for that teacher choice time, that's a differentiated, just right learning, hands-on activity. So you can see her defined workspace. These are materials that are just hers for that day. We wouldn't be sharing those with other students. And then there's some sensory time outside with the sensory bin and a painting activity. So that's just one example, and I have a couple other examples of what some of these choice times would look like. You'll notice 2 asterisks next to the teacher choice time, because that's a time that the teachers are working with small groups of students on just great skills. And if you're learning from home, you will also have an opportunity to work with the teacher on a differentiated learning activity throughout that day. It will not happen at the same time because the teacher in the classroom would be supporting the small group learning in the classroom. But later in the day, and you would be given that time, a teacher would directly reach out to your family and work with 3 or 4 children on a literacy skill or a math skill or a fine motor skill for that teacher choice time. We would have a special area every morning, and a special area teacher will live with the class. And so if the cohort is Little Jags, and there's 2 instructional groups in Little Jags, their special area might be guidance. So for 2 weeks, the guidance teacher is delivering that special area content, but also supporting the learning in the classroom. So she is a part of that cohort for those 2 weeks. And again, you'll see the 2 asterisks because the guidance teacher would be providing the content during the special area time to the students live in the classroom, but they would also have a time throughout the day that they're connecting with the students who are learning from home during a separate session. So they're not managing the 3-year-olds in the classroom as well as the 2-way video. They would be delivering the instruction to the students in the classroom and then having a separate time for delivering that same instruction to the students who are learning from home. And then a brain break, which is important, which is that time to wiggle and move. We'll be wiggling and moving through the whole day, but this will be a time to get outside or use our roar. And then this is another question I've received a lot. We have options for dismissal for Little Jags and pre-K. And so if you are a half-day student and you are not eating lunch, your dismissal would be at 11:30 for Little Jags and pre-K. And then our students who are staying would have lunch in their classrooms with their instructional groups. So Little Jags and pre-K will eat at 11:30. The lunch is provided by the dining room, and there is also an option to pack your lunch from home. And Jill, will you help me speak a little bit more about that commitment for lunch?
Yes, and what we're trying to avoid is families looking at the menu and opting in and out of lunch depending on what's being served in a particular day. So we are going to ask for an extended commitment, and I believe we're at 4 weeks, and you can either opt in or opt out in those extended blocks. And so if you opt out of lunch, then you would bring your lunch for 4 weeks, and then you can change your mind and then have the lunch delivered to the classroom for your child for the next 4 weeks.
Thank you. And then we also have a dismissal time for students who are choosing to eat lunch with their peers, and then their dismissal time would be at 12:10. So that's for students who are signed up for a half day with lunch. And then for the remaining students, they go outside for a nice long brain break. They're playing just with their cohort. So just Little Jags are on the playground at the same time, and then just pre-kindergarten is on the playground at the same time. They come back in for a rest time, and we'll talk more about masks and no mask time, but rest time will be a time that they're laying quietly on their mat, and they will not have a mask on during this time. They'll be seated, distanced, and still, which is our 3 criteria for no mask. And again, we'll talk about some things they can bring for rest time in a little bit. And if you ask any child if they're a sleeper at school, they'll all tell you they don't sleep, but many of them do. But for the children who don't sleep, they may get up and they'll have another quiet playtime and a read aloud and a pack up for dismissal. We have an asterisk here because we would do a live Zoom for that closing circle time for students who are learning from home, which would help close up their circle. That's actually taking place closer to 3 o'clock would be that closing circle. So that's a sample schedule for Little Jags and pre-K. And for kindergarten, you'll notice the same flow for the day for that arrival to school time. And when they're arriving in the morning, they still have a chance to practice those independent skills, hang up their backpack, hang up their jackets, turn in their homework folder. And here's an example of a photo. And if you know me, you know these are my sons. And today a group of teachers, we played around with how we would define a position for students. So here's my son Declan, And we used a yoga mat to show that this is his place in the classroom. And you can see he has a couple different items at his mat. He has an abacus for math and some counters and a puzzle. And those would be supplies for his math time in his physical space. And that yoga mat would help him realize that this is my space and this is where I need to be. But if he needs to crawl or move within that space, there is room. And then his brother Lincoln is at the table, and he has his math items. And we are offering, or we're showing, that we would have some options between floor and chair, and that students can pick places where they're comfortable. And I also chose this photo because these students are well more than 6 feet apart, which is really what we're measuring for. And you can still see that they're able to have dialogue across the classroom. They were almost 8 feet apart, but still able to connect with eye contact. They were still able to talk to each other and have a shared learning experience with the math items that they were working with. They would also have a morning meeting, which would be a live connect for students who are learning from home, and a brain break time. And then they would have an hour literacy block. And again, this is a double asterisk. This would be for students who are learning from home. You would have a touch point with a teacher at a different point in the day for that differentiated literacy instruction. And here's a photo, again, of Declan on his workspace with his items that he would have for that day. And we're not sharing materials. In the very corner of this photo, you can see a little, it's almost like a tackle box, and that's where all of their art supplies would live, and their pencils and their scissors and their glue. And those are items just for Declan, just for that student. And then I put 2 photos to the right. We have what is a little Montessori table, and that will be another seating option for a child to work at, which again defines the workspace. And then we have somewhat of a traditional desk. We like to think they're a little bit more contemporary than a traditional desk. But that would be a desk and a chair option for a student to work at as well. And then they have lunch at 11 o'clock. In kindergarten, we'll be eating in their classrooms with their instructional groups.
We are moving lunch back just 10 minutes, so we'll have lunch at 11:10 for kindergarten.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Every year we've had a quiet moment after lunch. We call that a mindful moment, just a time to collect ourselves. The kindergartners will tell you adamantly that they don't sleep, but every year we have at least one child fall asleep during that mindful moment, but it's just a quiet moment to reset for the day. And then we have an hour math block, and this is 2 more examples of what that might look like. So we have a picture of Lincoln doing a measuring activity independently with his materials at a chair and desk. And then today I took my sons out and we used the yoga mats again to define a workspace, and they each had their own items. He had a clipboard, his tackle box with supplies. And again, seeing that although we're socially distanced, we're still able to have conversations with each other. And that'll be a big part of our year, is how we're socially distanced, yet still learning together. And then they do have a second brain break, a writer's workshop time, and you'll see the asterisk here. If you're learning from home, you could zoom in for a mini lesson. Everybody has the mini lessons for writer's workshop, and then they break out to do their own writing. So if you were learning from home, you would zoom in, you would receive the same mini lesson as the students in the classroom, and then you would turn off your screen and do your writing just like the students in the classroom are doing their writing. They have a special area teacher as well. So if this is science, our science teacher would live with them for their time, and she would be delivering a live special area content to the kindergarten class. And then at another time, she would be delivering her special area content to the students who are learning from home. And then we always end our day doing some sort of project work or again, some independent play, and then that dismissal at 3 o'clock. So there's some technology pieces to be familiar with, and this is for if you're learning from home or learning in the classroom. So both of these will be pieces that you'll see and that you'll hear about. And the first is Seesaw. And Seesaw is a really great tool. It's an app, and it's something you can access on a web browser, so on a PC. And Seesaw will be a way that the students who are in the classroom will communicate what they're doing with you at home. And so as a parent, I have an account and I can log in and see what my child has shared with me. So I have an example of my child's Seesaw from the spring. So he's sharing his learning. And you'll see you can record with the video.
This is when I help somebody.
He says this is when I help somebody. And he goes on to explain his work. So if your child is in the classroom, your child will learn even at 3 years old when they're proud of something that the teacher, and eventually they'll be able to do it independently, that they'll be able to use an iPad and capture what they've done and share it with you as a parent or caregiver. And you'll hear their voice, you might see a photo. Some of our older students might be able to write a text caption. The teachers will also use Seesaw to share the learning with you. And we've heard a lot of comments about some folks who have been with us and they were missing the learning logs. So if you've been with us for a couple of years, you know that we used to have logs where the teachers would share that learning with you. Seesaw will help with that. We won't be able to see that learning when you drop your child off in the classroom as you usually are. So we're going to be really, really mindful about being able to share pieces of the classroom with you throughout the day. And so the teacher might take a photo of something, a project that the class has completed, and the teacher would share that with the whole entire community. And look what we did today. Make sure you ask your child about the airplane. And that's a really good talking point for you at home. So you would receive your child's work samples and then some pieces for the whole class. If you are learning from home, then you would receive your assignments. And this is a way for you to share your learning with your teacher. So you've been given some work to do, and maybe it's that writer's workshop and you've had that mini lesson and you've done your work. You can submit your work and then your teacher sees your learning. And then the really great piece is that the teacher or the caregiver can give a comment back.
I can see you being so helpful to people. It was so nice of you, Declan, to help.
And so Mrs. Landon has given him feedback on his work. And so we will use Seesaw whether you are learning from the classroom and you'll be sharing that learning with your family at home. And if you're learning at home, then you'll be sharing your work with your teachers and you'll be able to get feedback on that. The other piece that we'll be using for technology is a Google Classroom. And the Google Classroom really houses everything you need to know. And so when a student logs on, this is Lincoln's student view on a test class that we, as a group of teachers, have been working on. You would see a stream at the top. And the best part about the stream, what you need to know is the schedule. And so you would see a schedule. And the great part about this, if you were with us in the spring about learning from home, were those clicking and getting to the Zooms and making sure we had the links all right. This schedule will help take care of that. And so if your child is learning from home and that morning meeting is at, this time is off, but if it's at 9 o'clock and it's Monday, your child will be able to click the picture of his or her teacher and it will take them right to the Zoom session that they need to be a part of for the morning meeting. And if they have a small group work at 9 o'clock with Mrs. Brown, they would be able to click Mrs. Brown's name and it would take them right to their Zoom link to work with that teacher at 9 o'clock. They would have links for those special areas, again, for math groups, and then assignments that might live in Google Classroom, which I'll show you in a minute. This is updated every week. So you would see this new schedule here, and it'll also be shared with parents through an email as well. But this is really the hub of where do I need to be and when. Once we have that schedule, if you're learning from home, you would also have your classwork. And the really nice piece about this is how it's organized. It's organized by the week. And if you were with us in the spring last year, this kind of takes place with those Veracross emails. So each week you would see that week and the assignments. And if we look back to the schedule, we're teaching the students, even our 3-year-olds, to be readers and to consume this information and to understand it. So when we see a red dot as a 3-year-old, a 4-year-old, a kindergartner, we'll start to associate the red dot with Monday. Because when I go to my classwork, I can see on Monday that I have a writing activity. And when I click this, it gives me the directions for what I need to do. And if it's a Tuesday, it's an orange dot, I can see here that I have a Tuesday social studies activity. And this one happens to be to watch a short video and do some work here in a Google Doc. So you can see the organization that will take place. And we've been working on adding emojis to help even our youngest students begin to navigate the Google Classroom. So here would be number 1, let's read the book. Number 2, let's draw a picture to show our feelings. So number 1, the child would click on reading listening to the story, and then they would have their activity here. And if your student is learning in the classroom, we'll still be using these pieces to help them become familiar with this technology. And if your child is learning from home, this is where the majority of their assignments will live. What to bring to school, and this are for students who are coming to school each day. And we've decided on at least 2 masks, and you know your children best. And I know my children probably need 3 or 4 masks just because they might drop one. We will have extras at school for students who don't have an extra, but our goal is to wear one and to have a clean one in a Ziploc bag. Again, you know your child best, and you know if they need 3 or 4, then you might have extras in a Ziploc bag. Every day they'll bring a water bottle, and we'll be able to fill that up with fresh, clean water, but it needs to go home each night to be washed. And if you've been with us for a couple of years, you know we've usually kept those water bottles all week, but we're asking them to go home each night to be washed. If you're in Little Jags or pre-K and staying for a full day, you'll want your child to have a light blanket. And so some families in the past have brought the really snuggly big sleeping bags. And we're looking for some lighter, smaller, more like a crib blanket, and a small snuggle item that can be washed each night. And those items will only be used at rest time. Oops. And then 2 healthy snacks that I mentioned before. Little Jags pre-K and K will be bringing 2 snacks, and we have a healthy snack guideline that we'll share with you. And of course, we want them to be snacks they'll eat, so there's always the balance of healthy and something that they will eat. We've always asked students to bring extra clothes, and then we'll want to make sure that we have a backpack where they can bring their items home and back to school the next day. These are some dates to remember. On August 24th, the class list will be posted at 1 p.m. So you'll sign on to Veracross and you'll be able to see your child's class assignment. And at that same time, you'll be able to sign up for intakes. And for families who are new to Wellington, an intake is a time for you to meet with your child's teacher. In the past, children haven't usually attended those appointments. It's usually been a time for the teacher and the parent to meet. But we're increasing the time of the intakes and asking the child to come. So the child will have a chance to see the classroom. And then the teacher will be able to set the child up with some activities while the adults in the room have a conversation about what we need to know to best support your child in the classroom and what would help us have a successful start with your child. And those intakes will take place on the 27th through the 31st. And then we'll be dividing the groups, each instructional group, into 2. And so Little Jags already has 2 instructional groups, and then each of those groups will be even smaller. And you will either be in group A or group B, and you'll come for a whole day of school. And this will just help us learn all of the protocols and all of the new routines and everything that we need to learn how to keep ourselves safe, but also have a lot of fun at school. And if you're learning from home, you'll also join if you're in group A or group B during those times that we talked about. And that will help us understand maybe where we need to grow or learn with our technology or how we can better support you with your technology. So no matter what, if you're coming to school or learning from home, you'll still be assigned a group and you will join your class on those 2 days. And then on September 8th, which is the Tuesday after Labor Day, we'll welcome our entire lower school back to school. And then this last slide is around the social emotional health and safety. And we had quite a few questions about this last time. And so this is at the heart of everything we do. It's the most important piece of everything we do. We want children to be seen and known and cared for and feel safe. We spend a lot of time in morning meetings and closing circles building that trust in our classroom, and that will continue. So the last little bullet is that we're together yet apart, and we're going to find ways to do that. Although we have those 6-foot distancing bubbles, and we're going to talk about how we can keep ourselves safe, that we're still a community in our classroom, and this is still our safe place to be. That starts with age-appropriate conversations, and that will happen in the classroom. And we'll also have some ways to help you have those same conversations at home. And some of that will be through shared social stories. And we found some really great ways to help explain social distancing and to help explain why we wear a mask at school. And we'll share those same stories with families so that you're reading the same story that they're hearing at school and that we're sharing common language. This shows just one page of this a social story. So you can see them talking about social distancing means keeping extra space between myself and people. But it doesn't mean I can't be social and talk to my friends. So this will help us with language and will help you with that language. Oopsie doops. All my slides. That was my last slide. And then we will also talk about our masks and why we wear masks. And again, we'll share that language. The best piece of advice we can give to families with young children is to start practicing now, to make it a positive experience, and to make it a sense of normal. There's a sense of normalcy about wearing a mask. Talk about why we wear a mask, but it's a normal piece of our day. And even at my home, well, I'll just often ask the boys, which mask would you like to wear today? As the same way that I ask them, which t-shirt would you like to wear today? So we're offering choices, we're offering some ownership over that mask. We've tried lots of different masks, and I definitely have favorite ones. And so knowing that too, why is this your favorite? And trying to find ones that feel the same to them. In the school, we'll be doing the same. Positive reinforcement, a lot of modeling, talking about why we keep our masks on, but also the need for mask breaks are important. So we're going to begin the year with the idea that for our youngest learners, we will keep our masks on 50% of the time. So when we think about an hour, we will help the children keep their masks on for about 30 minutes with about a 30-minute break. Their breaks may happen, as I said, when they're socially distanced, they're quiet, and they're still. So if they're on their yoga mat and they're doing a puzzle and they're quiet and they're still, then they may bring their masks down for a mask break. If we're outside on our yoga mats, eating a snack, socially distanced, that would be considered a mask break as well. Our goal is to build to a 25-75 model. That 75% of the time we have our masks on, and then 25% of the time we have a break. So within an hour, they would have a 15-minute break when they're socially distanced and still and quiet. In kindergarten, that might look like your writer's workshop time, where we're all in our physical spaces anyway. We're still, we're quiet, we're writing. We can bring our masks down and take a mask break. But we'll work together as a whole classroom community about the importance of keeping those masks on, and also how we take our masks off, which is just as important, with clean hands and using the sides instead of pulling the front. So those will be pieces that the teachers will share with you and how they're using those languages and those social stories, and then you can help with reinforcement at home. And the one last piece, again, the more you can practice now, the easier it will be, and the less of a battle we put into it, the better. And I saw one little hack, which you can decide if it works for your family, but if your child's really struggling with a mask, you could have a movie mask break or a movie mask, and if they want to watch a movie, they have to have the mask on, and most of them will watch that movie with the mask on. Or if they want to play an iPad game, make it a short and sweet iPad game, but we're going to wear our mask while we play our iPad game in practice. And most of them will forget that they have that mask on. But the more we can make it positive and less of a battle, and the more we can give them ownership about picking out their own masks or which mask would you like to wear today, and just making it a part of normal routines, the easier it'll be for our students to accept that this is part of school. And our positivity and our mindset goes a really long way with our youngest learners. So if we go at it at positivity and you can do this and I'm so proud of you, they're going to think the same thing. So the way that we frame that will be really important as adults in their community. And that's all I have. I'm happy to take any questions.
Well, that was amazing. For anyone that I haven't met before, this is Danielle Turkovich. I am the Director of Marketing and Communications. I'm also the mother of a rising kindergartner, and I'm going to be implementing your movie mask hack tomorrow. That's a great idea. So behind the scenes, I've been kind of collating questions, and we have some really good ones. I'm going to start with a really high-level question that came in around student-to-teacher ratios. We've always had a point of pride in giving that individualized attention, but you know, now that we're in this COVID-19 season, can you talk a little bit about what that ratio might look like and what differences there may be or may not be?
That's a great question. It'll depend on the grade level and it depends on the space. And so a lot of our ways of thinking about students is, yes, the student-teacher ratio is extremely important, but also the space is extremely important. So for Little Jags this year, we would have 14 students with 2 teachers, and they're actually sharing the Strings building out in the back playground on Fishinger Avenue. And so if you're not familiar with that, you can drive down Fishinger and you'll see a building next to the playground. And it has 2 sides to it, so you would have a group of students on each side, each with a teacher. And pre-K, our model gets a little bit different, but we're still at a 1 to 9 model. And one of the classrooms is a little bit bigger, and it's a 1 to 10 model. And then we have learning guide support still in that grade level. And then we also have that special area teacher who's living in the grade level supporting the learning. And then in kindergarten, we've have been really lucky that we've broken into 4 different sections, and those models are 11 students in that each instructional group with a support from the special area teacher as well.
Excellent. Thank you so much for teasing that out for us. The next question that we received was really just around the logistics for pickup and drop off. There's 2 parts to it, but why don't we start with the kind of big picture, which is, you know, we have specific drop off and pickup times in the reopening plan, but for parents that accidentally get stuck in traffic or work problems, what happens to the kids if they're outside of that window?
Yeah, and I can't say that we have that formally developed yet, but my assumption is that they will probably come into the rotunda. Sign in will be in the rotunda as opposed to the lower school office where you used to go if you arrived late. And we will have somebody from the early childhood staff come meet the child in the rotunda and walk them to the class. But the parent won't come in, and you won't be going to the lower school office.
Okay, that's super helpful. So the second half of the question is for families with multiple children, maybe some that are not in early childhood, maybe in lower or middle. What happens to siblings when drop off is at a certain time? Like if start point is earlier for Little Jags than middle school or vice versa. For multiple families with multiple children, what considerations are made for them in drop off or aftercare or after school? Sorry, to clarify.
So all lower school classes start at the same time. So if you have children anywhere in lower school through early childhood through grade 4, it's all the same. And I think middle school is making some arrangements to sort of coordinate their arrival time with lower school. We've got, I think, a little 5-minute gap in there. And so you'll hear more about if you're coordinating between lower school and middle school of how we manage that 5-minute gap.
Thank you so much. That's great. So the next question that I'm hearing a lot is really around the dress code. So for Little Jags and pre-K, it's always kind of been a little bit more relaxed, but our kindergartners, that's when they typically get their first taste of what dress code life is like. So is that changing at all this year, and what might parents expect for kindergarten dress code?
Everything we know about children who are coming back either on campus or learning from home is that the more consistent the routine, the better. And so getting up at the same time that you would if you were going to school and putting on your school clothes the same way you would if you were coming to campus is really important in students having the mindset of, even though I'm at home, I'm actually going to school from my house. And so we're going to ask everyone to have it's not a uniform, it's a dress code, but whatever they would be wearing to school that they would wear at home. And occasionally last spring, we saw some little people in pajamas or kind of still at the breakfast table eating breakfast. And really, it's in the best interest of the child to have a routine so that when school starts, they are dressed and ready to be a student at school. So that would include wearing the dress code, no belts, but everything else. And it can be anything that's listed in the Wellington dress code. Shelley, would you add any more to that?
No, I agree. And as a parent of young children, It's a slippery slope when you start to go to morning meeting in your pajamas. And so just the more that we can help our own children at home know that this is school has started, we're getting dressed, we're brushing our teeth, breakfast is finished, it's time for a morning meeting is important and helpful in the end.
That's super helpful. So while we're talking a little bit about dress codes and routines, let's talk about masks. As we all know, mask guidance seems to be a hour by the hour update. But can you give us some high level understanding of what the parameters around masks are from the best of your knowledge? And then I'll share what I know from a marketing standpoint, because we actually just got some new updates in today.
Yeah, well, the whole school will have guidelines for the masks that can be worn on campus. So where we are right now, and Danny, you may have a more current update, is we're not going to allow gaiters or bandanas because they're just too thin. And there's been some research on that actually can be counterproductive, actually. So we'll have specific guidelines on 3-ply masks that fit over the nose and the mouth and fit tightly enough that you're not getting airflow out from underneath or out from the sides. And Danny, would you add anything to that?
That's exactly on point. So I would just add to that, that just to be technically, cover all the bases, we will not allow any kind of mesh material or material with holes in it. That includes vent or valve little features. And that, that's just because of, as we follow the science and we continue to learn more about how the virus is transmitted, we want to make sure that we are up to date with where the science is taking us. So one thing I would just add to that is that we do have masks available, FDA approved surgical grade masks available for any student that would like to wear them. It can be by choice or in the event that something happens to the mask that was brought with them that day.
We did have a few people ask in our last town hall about the face shields and thinking that would be more comfortable for students. And all of the research and recommendations are that those are not safe because of the airflow that comes out underneath and around them. The recommendations have been that if you wear a shield, you also wear a mask. So if you're looking to find something more comfortable, that wouldn't be an exchange for a mask. We will have some teachers who may be wearing both just to protect their eyes. So you may see some teachers who are wearing both a mask and a shield.
And some of the teachers have been exploring different types of masks. So ones that have plastic in the middle to allow a child to see their smile. If we're doing a literacy lesson or our French teacher has kind of spearheaded this whole, it's really important that they see her mouth when she's speaking French to them. But we've talked about as a team how we might utilize those masks as well, especially in the beginning for the students to see our smiles.
We, in certain parts of our building, look like we're hosting a mask retail store. We've ordered one of every mask on the planet, looking more specifically for our teachers and making sure that they're effective in their instruction, but with a commitment to also keeping them safe and healthy.
This is so helpful. So can you just clarify for students that are younger, such as the Little Jags in pre-K, that we will be, I just want you to confirm that we will be requiring them from our youngest learners all the way up through 12th grade?
We will.
Okay.
Yes.
And for students that have any kind of challenge with this, how might we direct them to start a conversation with your team?
That they have a challenge with the mask?
Yeah, so if students have challenges with masks, who should they talk to have that conversation?
A nice point of just intro would be at that intake conference of just saying, gosh, we've tried a lot and here are the things we've tried, and that gives the teacher a heads up of just might be some sensitivity around it. Again, the more positive that we can make it, positive reinforcement, providing a lot of just, you did it, you did. I mean, with our 3-year-olds, I will say most of the students that we've worked with who have been masked, whether it's at a summer camp or at a birthday party that we've been a part of, once they get going, most of the students forget about the mask. So So giving them the benefit of the doubt that they can do this. And this is one of those instances too, where maybe that positive peer pressure of I want to go to school, so I'm going to put on that mask, works in our favor as adults.
Yeah, and again, the best partner you can be with the school on behalf of your child is to start practicing that now. If you haven't done it over the summer, try some of Shelley's strategies, and you can even set a timer and say, okay, we're going to do 5 minutes, and then tomorrow we're going to do 10 minutes. I will tell you, I grew up in an era where not every car had seat belts. And when that started, there were a lot of kids who, you know, were used to climbing over the car seat and riding in the back of the station wagon and hanging their feet off the back, which sounds crazy now, but we all did that. And seatbelts became the law. And there were parents then who said, my child will never wear a seatbelt. Well, if you can't go anywhere unless you wear a seatbelt, it's amazing how quickly all children started wearing seatbelts, and from there going into car seats and so on. So we just can't leave any wiggle room around this policy. It's for the health and safety of your child, the health and safety of the other children, the health and safety of all of our teachers. So it's that important. And so we ask that you make it a priority at your home to try some different strategies and have your child start getting used to wearing the mask.
Those are some great suggestions. I love that. One last point or a clarification that I'd like to just ask you to speak a little bit about is around masks and brain break. I know that a lot is still being determined, but can you share a little bit about the current thinking for that?
Do you want to take that one, Shelley, or you want me to do that?
So the piece with masks that we're really looking for if we're outside is socially distanced. And so if everybody has a ball and they're going in one direction, then they wouldn't have to wear their masks. If they are playing and chasing and we really can't determine that they're always keeping that 6-foot distancing, then we would ask them to mask at that time. And PE is working through some different scenarios that maybe Jill can share of masked and unmasked activities outside that we would be able to determine that they're keeping that social distance so we don't have to wear a mask, or we're not able to ensure that we can keep social distance so we would be masked.
So PE, as well as much of the day, as much as we can do outside in the fall, if the weather's nice, we're going to do as much instruction as we can out of doors, and certainly PE is anxious to get the children outside. And we've met with all the PE teachers from early childhood up through grade 12, and they all have, you know, the same desire to get kids moving. But also aware that they've got to be careful of where kids are in space. So the plan is right now for lower school to sort of reserve a large part of Roberts Field in the front, the big soccer field. And you can't see me, but I'm gesturing like this. And that there will be hula hoops, and each child will stand in the middle of a hula hoop, and those will all be distanced. And that their masks are on walking outside. But if they are, for instance, lined up 6 or 8 feet apart and the teacher's on the other side of the field and they're going to do a running activity, they can take the mask off, run to the other side, put it back on. So there are activities that they can do where the equipment is dedicated just to that student. So an example would be, I know Mrs. Fuller was doing activities where they were doing sort of pretend fishing. They've got fishing poles with magnets and such that they use on the field. That pole would be used just by that student. No other student would touch it. It would be in their hula hoop little circle when they come. They would leave it there when they go back to class. They'd put their masks on and go back to class, and everything would be disinfected. I will say that we're going to start with an abundance of caution. So we will be slow to introduce equipment. We want to make sure that every child understands the parameters, the routines, and the procedures, but there's evidence that we can move towards that once students have embraced the distancing and just keeping their equipment to themselves. But we'll sort of work towards that, especially with our younger children. We'll just start by moving, and then when we feel pretty confident they understand the not sharing of anything, We may introduce some things that they would just touch with their feet. You know, they might dribble a ball from one end to the other end, but it would just be equipment that they themselves use. And then everything would be disinfected before another class would use it.
Amazing. Thank you so much for all that detail. The next question that I have is semi-related to physical activity, but actually more about the classroom. In Shelley's presentation, we saw yoga mats as kind of each individual's place. Can you speak a little bit about who's supplying that, if that's part of the, I didn't see it on the list, but maybe you can clarify that point for us.
Today was our first day back on campus as a full team of teachers, and everybody is very excited about redefining their spaces. And we have some yoga mats at school that we used as place markers today. We're also thinking through options of maybe a child bringing a beach towel and that's their place marker, and they would have some ownership over that beach towel that could also be washed each night. Some of our other teachers have worked through the idea of different types of fabric or laminated paper being their space. So we haven't landed on the one answer for every single grade level. Today, like I said, was the first day, and there was a lot of excitement around it. I know we'll continue those conversations. And then when a teacher does kind of land on what works for their space and their instructional group and that group of students, we'll definitely figure out what that is. And either that beach towel will come from home or the school would provide the yoga mat.
Okay, that is great clarity. And then that kind of leads me into nap time. You mentioned some kids don't sleep, some do, but they all lay down. Can you talk a little bit about what they'll be laying on and what the measures we're taking in that space?
Yes, each child has always had their own mat that it's just theirs. It's labeled, it's theirs, and we've always cleaned them at the end of rest time anyway. So that will continue. Just that is their rest mat. This is their space. It'll be cleaned after every rest time. Depending on where they are in the space, we're going to socially distance them as much as possible. And the numbers do get smaller in the afternoon, just because some students do go home before lunch and after lunch. And we would position them in a space where they're really far apart and possibly they're facing a wall, so they are unmasked, and that airflow, if they were to sleep, would go towards the wall. If they are not sleeping and they're sitting up and doing a quiet activity, then they're still socially distanced, quiet and still, so that would still be a mask break. But we also know 3-year-olds, and we don't always sit on our mat for the entire time. So then it would be encouraged to put on their masks if they're going to get up and ask the teacher a question, or if we're having a little bit of trouble sitting still on our mat.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So I wanted to talk a little bit about potty breaks, potty accidents, and all of that really kind of, fun bathroom stuff. So the first question we had was really around, how bathroom breaks will work, especially for, limiting the amount of kids in the restroom, knowing they all love each other so much. Can you share any kind of high-level thought you have about that?
Yeah, and we're all parents in the room, so we can talk about restroom stuff pretty openly. The Little Jags building is actually those 2 classrooms we talked about, and in the middle there's 2 restrooms. So there's one restroom for one side and one restroom for the other side. So they will stick with that one potty that connects to their room, and it's a one at a time position, and it always has been, even when we've used the building for other things. It's one in, one out. The same will be for early childhood, pre-K and kindergarten, who's in the same building. Summer camp had a pretty good system where they had a little visual on the wall that kind of walked through the procedures, and it was one in, one out. They washed their hands, they came out. And my 2 boys went to summer camp, and I went to pick them up one day, and I said, go to the restroom. And Lincoln went in and Declan waited. And I said, Declan, go in, we have to get going. He said, no, you have to stand right here on this little spot, and I wait my turn. And that was the second day of summer camp that they had learned a new routine. So we'll be working through restroom procedures for all of the students in lower school. I saw one question pop up about specifically potty accidents, and there will be times that we will not have that 6-foot distancing with a teacher and a child, and one would be a potty accident. We've always worn gloves. We've always been really careful with all of those pieces. So the teacher would be masked and shielded and with gloves. The teachers have talked about having some exterior clothing, whether it's a scrub top or something that they can use. and then they could take that off after they've worked directly with a child within a 6-foot distancing. I've also had some questions about comforting a young child. We all know young children need comforted, whether they've fallen and they've scraped their knee, or just really, really miss my mom or my caregiver. And so again, masks, face shields, there might be a scrub top where we can change in case we get some tears or schnuts on us, but also facing the child out. So we can still comfort that child, but we're not a face-to-face interaction, that we're able to provide what the child needs. And once the child gets calm, which we know we go from really big emotions to nice and calm within a matter of a couple seconds, then we would get back to that social distancing and have the conversation that we needed.
You guys have thought of everything. I love that. So we had a couple questions come in just about masks, and I was thinking about the fact that with potty accidents, it's always good to have clothing on hand, a backup pair and a backup mask, like you mentioned in your list. Do you want all of those things to be labeled? Can they be in the same Ziploc, separate? What are your thoughts about that?
Those are great questions. In the past, they've been in different Ziploc bags. So we've always taken students' extra clothes and actually put them in a big bin of all the extra clothes. And this year, everything will live in the backpack. And so it'll be really important to make sure there's different size backpacks, and a lot of especially our 3-year-olds will bring the really little backpacks. You're gonna wanna get the bigger backpack so that the nap items and the extra clothes and the masks and the water bottle can all live in that backpack. So they'll look really small when they carry their big backpacks in, but they'll have plenty of room. And then that's also a cue for you at the end of the day to just go through that backpack and see what needs to be replaced. And again, the nap items should be washed every night just because they will be unmasked and have those cuddles up by their faces. And so that will just help you just kind of take inventory each night.
I will add that we're looking for lanyards where if they take off a mask, it can hang from the lanyard. We just have to have tearaway or breakaway lanyards so that if for any reason it would get pulled on or caught on something, it immediately releases. So we're looking at those as well for the times where they take them off, that if they don't have a place to put them, that they would stay on their person. We've also, and I don't have an answer for this, but some of the teachers have discussed whether we should have people's names on their mask, not to identify the mask, but to identify the person, because a lot of us look alike with our masks on. So we're talking about that, and I don't know where that will land, but even teachers that we see from a distance, everybody's looking sort of the same with them, if you only see them from here. So teachers may be doing that just so students can recognize them, but that's under conversation, and we may decide to do that with children too, so that they can recognize each other easily with their names on their masks.
That's a great point. So we have about 3 minutes left, and I have one question that I would like to close with. As with everything in 2020, things are subject to change. And we did have one question come in early on around what might happen in a scenario where the school is forced to move into a virtual mode. What offerings will exist for our younger learners and for the early childhood students?
Okay. Shelley, you want to take that one?
That's a great question, and one I've had a couple of times as well. If we were, yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. We've had that question a couple of times. We would shift into a childcare model where we would still provide childcare for our little Jags pre-K and kindergarten students. Jill, do you have anything to add?
No, right now the child care would be limited to early childhood. If we would shift, the whole school would shift to remote. We've got pandemic licensure for child care for young children that would allow us to provide that for the younger children.
Excellent. Well, that is it. We covered all the questions that came through in the chat. If for some reason we missed your question, or if you didn't hear what you were hoping to hear tonight, both Jill and Shelley will be available to contact, and we will be sending this recording out for you to watch again or just spend some time with And of course, you can email us with additional questions. As a reminder, our third release of the opening plan will come out August 25th. And we hope for that version to be the most complete. A lot of what you hear tonight or heard tonight will be included in there, as well as some guidelines around celebrations, traditions, pickups and drop-offs. Anything and everything that we can add clarity to, we will certainly include in that document. So, Jill and
Danny,
Shelley, thank you.
thank you. And I will add one thing. And Shelley said today was the first day where all the teachers were back on campus. And there are people who haven't been back in the school since last March. And you don't know how you're going to feel coming back to school. And Shelley, I know, will agree with me that there was such energy in the building today. Everybody was masked as they're carrying furniture and supplies from room to room, as so many people are moving to new spaces in the building. But it was one teacher after another that was saying, well, come here, I want to show you what we're thinking, and look what we've designed, and this is going to be amazing. And even teachers who I think, had questions about their own safety were feeling energized, and that they were seeing the possibilities of how this could work really well for children as well as for themselves. So it was a good day. It was a day full of energy, and that was only day one. So we've got a lot of days yet to get things in place and ready for your children and for you and for our teachers. And each day that goes by, we're getting closer and closer to getting the spaces just right and getting the schedule just right. And I think we're really energized by that.
Amazing. Well, thank you both so much for taking time. And thanks to everybody for joining us tonight. Have a good evening.
Good night.